Oh, Japan. What a place. What a culture. And of course, for nerds such as myself, the Land of the Rising Sun is relevant for its tradition of pumping out quirky, compelling video games. Hidetaka Miyazaki gave us Dark Souls. Hideo Kojima gave us Metal Gear Solid. Nintendo are still siphoning money from Shigeru Miyamoto's fat portfolio, which brings me to Goichi Suda, or as he's better known, Suda 51. Suda 51 is something of an anomaly in the video game sphere. See, if Miyazaki was Pink Floyd, Kojima was Queen, and Miyamoto was fucking, I don't know, Casey and the Sunshine Band. Suda 51 will be some mad amalgamation of The Clash and David Bowie. In fact, Suda himself has described his game design ethos as punk, going so far as to say that the great majority of games are basically copycats, mimicking other titles in their gameplay and themes rather than striving for something new or unconventional. So, having exhumed the concept of marketability from his warped mind, Suda set about bringing us some of the most balls-to-the-wall gaming joyrides ever to grace our unworthy eyeballs. Killer is Dead came out on the 1st of August 2013, and by coming out, I don't mean a quiet conversation with a loving parent. It's as if a schizophrenic Japanese teen attended 3.5 writing classes in LA, was given a tab of ecstasy and was told to describe the most radical story ever. Which is not to say that it's good inherently, but it holds attention the same way a warehouse rave full of epileptic people might. Our protagonist is Mondo Zappa. Yes, as in, put your Mondo Zappa in my bodacious orifice, skater boy. This piece of stylized self-insert fanfiction is an assassin with a katana, this being a Japanese game marketed to American audiences, so of course he fucking is. He also has a cybernetic arm powered by blood, for it's always blood. You'll never see a cybernetic arm powered by cups of tea, or positive affirmations, oh no. Mondo's one of those old school proto-anti-heroes, where he basically has no negative traits, other than thinking that communicating entirely through monotone brooding and quips is the hot shit, daddy-o.
Sorry, baby. I got a job to do.
To begin with, you're dropped into a dark alleyway. John Candy's corpse here opens fire with his gun arm. Seems robotic limbs are a staple of this universe. Didn't realize I was playing Deus motherfucking X. Mondo strolls forward after him, deflecting bullets like he's a flat earther and the bullets are rational arguments. Candy slips out of sight and then ambushes you at the alley entrance, and blows your fucking brains out. Man, what was that, like 3 minutes of playtime for $20? Now that is a good value proposition. As it turns out, the chromosome thief didn't actually kill or even scathe you, even though Mondo's skull is pretty clearly pierced like a goth clitoris. Mondo rises up like Dracula Jesus Christ and slices the dude's arm clean off. Then there's a slow time event where you hold the right trigger to raise his sword at a sexy camera angle, so that he has time to say his catchphrase before he strikes the final blow. Then, as you'd expect, some magic blackcurrant juice flies out of his neck stump and the moon becomes a massive wine gum. Hang on. 180k for 38 seconds of work. How do I get that job? What degree do I need to get to have that job? The second stage, which is still essentially prologue, opens with an ominous chest voice, followed by oh dear god no. Mondo's uncanny valley sexy time was interrupted to introduce us to the game's combat. Killer is Dead is a spectacle fighter, drawing parallels to games such as Devil May Cry, although to be honest it's probably not worthy of that comparison mechanically. While the flow is good and everything looks awesome, combat does basically just come down to hammering one button until you have as much RSI as this intricate wanking apparatus would suggest.
That must be the fella who masturbates all day long.
There's a stun that doubles as a guard break, a useless sweep and a dodge that, when timed correctly, allows for a free counterattack for a few seconds. Mondo's arm doubles as a secondary projectile weapon and you have a glory kill ability. And that's pretty much the extent of it. There's no combos, no lifts, no parrying. Like I said, what it has in style and flow, it severely lacks in substance. Truly, Dante's an Xbox, Mondo's more Atari. After this, Mondo encounters this John Wick cosplayer hassling this young lady Mika, who happens to both work and live with Mondo because, and I quote,
I found her collapsed in the street, so I took her in and gave her some food. I then discovered she happens to be pretty good at making soft-boiled eggs, so I'm letting her stay.
Yes, this schoolgirl works for an execution office. Just don't question it. Probably made perfect sense to Suda and all the voices in his head. Keanu pimp slaps Mika and engages Mondo in a brood-off, revealing that he preceded Mondo as an executioner. And then, out of nowhere, Mondo sprints at the guy and shreds him to pieces. Now this is my kind of boss fight. Layered bosses with genuine depth demand respect from the player. Get that shit out of my kitchen. Nah, what I need is a glorified QTE in which you press the same button 20 times and then the bad man fall down. Neo then goes and meets the boss man, more cut up than an emo in a wood chipper. They talk about the darkness.
Can't explain all the feelings that you're making me feel.
With no explanation as to what that means. Then drinks some wine and he explodes. Want to know the best part? None of this has anything to do with anything in the following stages. Imagine if Spider-Man 2 started with 20 minutes of Peter Parker bullying his co-workers. But if Peter Parker had yet to hit puberty. Oh wait. The third stage presents you with your first real job. An angry man on a boat passive-aggressively flings an offer of employment at the porthole of Mondo's yacht, because just handing the thing to him would have lacked the comedic timing. Mondo is of course standing conveniently at the porthole for the 3 seconds that this actual order on someone's life is stuck to the fucking window and tells Mika to get her ass up. She throws a shit fit when she finds out she didn't qualify as an executioner. Everything about this is uncomfortable.
I was afraid of that. I'm a loser.
Man, that is some real dubbing. Mika is a bit perplexing as a character. She's canonically 20 years old, but her behaviours are more indicative of a tween. What's more, she has quite literally no character development at all. You could argue that she's there to balance out Mondo's edginess, but then Mondo just comes across as a lovably overconfident ponce, so their relationship is less one of peers and more akin to that of a man and his squeaky kawaii dog. Mondo, whom I'm going to refer to as Monty from now on because Mondo reminds me of Biodome, and anything that reminds me of Biodome can fuck right off out of this plane of existence, quells her by taking her on as his assistant. Paulie Shore was a mistake. They report into work, which transitions into the introduction of the other two members of the protagonist Scooby Gang. This blonde Brit is Vivian Squall, once an executioner herself before promotion to an executive officer at the firm. There's something mildly amusing about going from an executioner who takes heads to an executive officer who takes, what, tax rebates. And then there's Brian Roses. He's basically cyborg with a beer gut, a cigar and a Hawaiian shirt. He was also an executioner before retiring and starting the Brian Execution firm, I shit you not. With the introductions out of the way, the client is revealed and holy shit dude. You're gonna want to turn this whole dead-eyed porcelain doll thing down if you ever want to win the hand of a homely Fraulein in marriage.
I'm Robert, the artist.
Robert the artist explains that there's some kind of terrifying creature living next door to him, the cause of some recent disappearances.
That's only speculation, of course.
Speculation. The truth is often found buried deep within speculation.
Hey big guy, wanna try that line read maybe one more time? Viv drops Monty and Mika off at the target's house and the level finally begins. The first thing you'll notice about the gameplay is how slippery the movement is. Monty handles like he's on ice skates, sliding around all over the shop. This isn't so noticeable in later stages with wider open spaces, but in this comparatively cramped house environment you'll find yourself smashing off walls like a depressed Roomba, twisting the camera into knots. Speaking of the house, its aesthetic is actually pretty cool, with a sort of sugary J-pop vibe, right up to the point where you realise what the actual theme is. See, the monster turns out to be a young woman, named Alice, of In Wonderland fame. The interpretation of Alice in Wonderland as a representation of creepiness through innocence is so overdone that I'm honestly surprised Suda51 allowed it in his game. I mean, there's not only been a Tim Burton movie, but a straight up game series on the concept. What annoys me though is that they all get completely wrong what actually makes the Alice story creepy. The dude who wrote it, Lewis Carroll, was arguably a paedophile who did so to get into the pants of the real Alice, an 11-year-old girl. And the story is laden with metaphorical representations of figures in his life and repressed emotions. But of course, all the weight that context might have carried goes out the window, and after completing a few menial tasks for Alice's sister, you encounter little old Alice herself. She's visibly in a lot of pain and accepting of the execution.
I took a vacation to the moon, and ever since I returned, it hurts.
You took a vacation to a barren rock outside the Earth's atmosphere. There ain't no fucking Disneyland there, lady. She gives you a name, and then transforms into the beast the artist portrayed. Regardless of all I've said about this stage, that boss design is so fucking cool. Quelaag can piss off. This is the only insect demon lady thing for me. The boss fight has 3 phases, as do most in the game. The first 2 are pretty similar. You're either hacking away or shooting her off the walls until you can cut off one of her front limbs. In the final phase, she sprouts a bughead that fires out hatchlings, but it just boils down to shooting her off the walls again until you can finish her off. They return Alice's head to the painter, but it turns out he was a ghost of one of her victims and he evaporates. Fucking what? And then Brian and Vivian banter about payment like it was the end of a fucking sitcom. At this point you're given a bit more freedom as to how you play the game. You still progress through the main story missions linearly, but between them you'll unlock challenge missions that take place in the environments of the stages you've completed. And to be blunt, they're all pretty mundane. Nothing they offer is more engaging or entertaining than the main missions. And without the madness of the story to hold your attention, the weaknesses of the gameplay really start to shine through. Some of them are also shockingly basic in design. Take this bike one, which compares unfavorably to Temple Run, or this one in an elevator which involves killing the same mob over and over and nothing else. You can almost smell the desperation of the dev team trying to pad the game, seeing as the main story only clocks in at about 8 hours. Of course, challenge missions are nothing new to this genre, but this is Suda51 we're talking about. So along with the challenges, there's also so-called gigolo missions in which you must seduce beautiful women. There's basically no setup, it's just Monty and a hot chick in some random place. You're prompted to put on a pair of glasses and... Let me dissect this scenario for you. You put on a pair of x-ray glasses that allow you to see women's underwear, and then by staring at the goods you somehow figure out what kind of gift would impress her. I guess I know what I've been doing wrong. It also apparently causes blood to flow to your head, which doesn't make much sense to me considering that when I see a classy broad, all my blood flows somewhere else, if you know what I'm saying. Out of my slit wrists. Gifts are bought with your wages in between missions. After you deduce what kind of gift she'd like, you can present it to her in the most overly extravagant way possible. Impress her enough with your offerings and you're in there, my son. You're treated to a snippet of their bedroom antics as Action Man and Barbie clack their smooth groins together. You can go back to each girl to woo them again, and doing so will unlock a little bit more of their unholy lovemaking scene each time. But the weirdest thing about this whole ordeal is that at different points in your progression with each girl, if you can call it that, they give you an alternate secondary weapon out of nowhere. Like, I just can't fathom how that interaction goes down. Oh baby, I've never been pleasured so thoroughly. Please take this fucking huge laser cannon as a token of my gratitude. Monty's weird armament-based promiscuity aside, I figured out at this point that I could put alternate costumes on Mika and Vivian, which, let's be honest, make them look like strippers. Of course, that would be a highly immature and puerile thing to do. The next client is this woman called Moon River. This pale, emotionless husk was apparently the ruler of the moon before she was usurped by David, the same guy that Alice mentioned. So naturally, she wants him dead. Yeah, I'm gonna need a few decades to take this image in. My god, I salute you, sir. These guys are called wires, by the way. They were once people who were infected with dark matter, reduced to mindless zombies, and then augmented with cybernetics. They come in all the standard flavors, with smashy boys, shooty boys, and cowardly boys to boot. They're varied enough that I have no major complaints in that regard, even if most standard enemies are minor alterations on the concept of bad dude. I do quite like their visual design though, kinda makes me think of the Shredder if he was a disco dancer. The gimmick of the stage is that after you clear a room, touching a painting will transport you to another area. This seems innocent enough on the surface, but it's really lazy game design when you think about it. Instead of designing one large congruent palace level, they took all these snippets of a level that wouldn't make sense architecturally and Frankenstein them together. And while this kind of thing doesn't appear in any of the other stages, the level design is generally just tortuously boring. Almost every area of every stage can be described as either a combat arena or a corridor that connects two combat arenas. It's just stagnant and by the numbers, contrasting really negatively against the vibrancy of the plot. Eventually you end up face to face with David himself.
What are you doing?
You're really going to ask me that?
I mean, it seems like a reasonable question to me.
Can't you tell just by looking? I'm acquiring unparalleled power.
Yes, of course. This is clearly the attire of a man acquiring unparalleled power. His smile is also a glorious disaster of facial animation. He asks Monty to join him, but gets turned down, so they get to fighting. Imagine playing through the tutorial of your favorite fighting game, but with the blandest possible character. That's pretty much the experience. At each interval of the fight, you face off with David, which amounts to hammering the attack key. I swear to God I finger blasted that thing like it was your mum in a club bathroom, but I always lost these. When you beat him, David makes Monty's arm go haywire and then just disappears anticlimactically. He returns to the office defeated, offering the now homeless Moon River a place to stay on his yacht. After this, Monty has some kind of lucid dream in which he encounters some of his memories. Now that is some subtle symbolism. He sees himself eating eggs with his mom, and then playing with a young Moon River and a cerulean fucking unicorn. She gives the young Monty a kiss and they go play tag, but then he runs into this woman, the Queen of Dreams. Then, the young Moon River drowns, even though she's alive in the waking world, so this is clearly bullshit. But then it's not Moon River, it's the Red Woman, with awesome demon arms I might add. Then she does a fucking clone jutsu and you fight her, but it's so easy it's practically redundant. When you kill her, Monty wakes up in a cold sweat. Moon River is like, you good? And Monty's like, I'm good. Following this, you have to go after this guy Victor who stole this musician lady Jubilee's abilities. She's supposed to be so talented at her craft that she can influence people's actions. So Victor took her talent and put it into a box, somehow, to use for evil, leaving Jubilee deaf. The first half of this level is fairly enjoyable. You're still traversing linear corridors, but at least they're nice and wide open and the combat is more or less non-stop, keeping you engaged.
I can lend a hand.
I've never been this erect. Unfortunately, you then reach this bit around an elevator that basically just entails pressing buttons to open doors until you press the right button to open the right door, and it's just tedium incarnate. This is not what I ordered, Suda, take it back. Then there's the boss fight against Victor, who turns into a super wire with extendo arms straight out of Inspector Gadget. This fight gets a thumbs up for demanding the player's attention at all times. See, you cut one of his arms off at the end of each of the first two phases, but give him enough time and you'll glue them right back on, undoing all your hard work. The skyscraper collapses when you beat him, and some Ribena flies out of his corpse into the moon. You bring Victor's head back to Jubilee, but instead of paying you, she turns into a songbird and flies away, because of course she fucking does. It's like when I'm ordering food at my local McTaco King, and when the lady asks me to pay, I transform into a fucking mountain goat. Mission number the next one has you chasing after this Yakuza boss, Hamada Yama. He's infused with this tiger spirit, which I guess he used for good until it got polluted with dark matter, and now he's terrorizing Kyoto. The stage leading up to him is absolute hot garbage. You just blunder your way around this scant circuit of a map looking for these little idols. When you shoot one of these, a mini boss pops out, which you kill to obtain a scroll. Rinse and repeat 5 times and then the boss fight opens. This entire stage couldn't have been more arbitrary if Monty had just chilled in these hot springs until this grumbly bald fuck died of old age. The fight against Shere Khan here is way better than the preceding stage in that it's merely below average. There is a horrible clunky bike sequence followed by the main event in a Zen garden. This boss is noticeably basic mechanically. You just attack and dodge his AoEs. There's nothing more to it. The tiger spirit comes out for his final phase, but this only serves to make the fight easier because his attacks are even more obviously telegraphed. He commits seppuku when he's defeated, then you cap him and return the head to Brian. After that, Monty has another wet dream in which he returns to rocky ocean world. Book your holiday in advance. He meanders through little bits of previous stages, killing grunts for sport in his casual attire. White really doesn't suit you, my dear Montesquieu. Eventually he comes back to his mom making eggs and just sort of slips himself in like it's an improv scene. It dawned on me around about here how freakishly small Monty's head is. After he criticizes the poor woman's eggs, there's a knock at the door. Lo and behold, it's Davy Boy, having a right old giggle.
We're in the middle of dinner. Please leave.
I mean, I can't really argue with that. David barges in, sword swinging. Monty dodges his swipe, but because he's apparently incapable of regaining his balance, Mommy gets shanked. Look at this fucking clown. Of course his mom died. I could kill 12 mothers in the time it takes this bastard to recover from a strong gust of wind. There is this completely random segment where you have to pick David out of a lineup a few times. Then the whole scene plays out again, except this time Monty gets his arm lopped off at the end. But with some help from his magical fucking unicorn, yeah, I hope you didn't forget that little detail, he escapes and is brought to Brian, who I guess patches him up and makes him into the executioner he is today. Then he wakes up on his yacht to find Mika bitching about eggs. You know, business as usual. Also, explain to me how this pinhead is getting paid to have nightmares. Next, you have to go and execute the least intimidating giant ever, because some scientists fucked up and mutated one of their guys. But, when the gang show up, he's nowhere to be seen. Turns out the lazy fuck is asleep within the bowels of the complex. He gets woken up and wanders off, leaving Monty to grind his way up to the roof to face Giant Head, as he is so creatively named. I do appreciate that the enemy encounters start ramping up, so that the combat challenge isn't completely non-existent. The boss fight, however, is a total drag. It's one of those generic giant torso fights, during which you avoid big slow attacks and shoot highlighted weak points, because apparently all of this several thousand ton abomination's vital organs are in these little sacks on his face. I don't think your sword is that fucking long, Monty boy. He finds that tiny earth from his dream in the giant's eye, and then dark matter starts affecting him through his arm. Vivian takes out a gun to put him out of his misery, but he recovers before she pulls the trigger. Then the scientist from before appears, except he's an alien. Sure, of course, how could he not be? He takes the miniature earth and leaves
A small sun?
in return. Then Brian calls and tells them to go straight to Russia for the next job. The target for this one is a steam train named Tommy. It gets infected with dark matter, becomes sentient, and then sets out from Moscow to take revenge for the fact that it was retired. I mean, this is pretty realistic when you think about it. My bike tried to stab me last time I caught a bus. This setup gives rise to some of the most beautifully nonsensical dialogue I've ever heard.
Men have always had a romance with steam engines. All that power, the mechanical form. It's not a job for women and children. Ain't that right, Mondo?
That's right. Railways are a man's passion.
Monty works his way from the back of the train to the engine itself. The stage is therefore basically just a straight line, although I guess that's not really a complaint because, you know, it's a fucking train. The boss fight for this one is just weird. The face of the train sprouts eye stalks and then a thick, veiny dick. I mean, there's a face on the end of it, but let's be honest, this goddamn train's primary attack is the fucking helicopter. Monty shreds this grotesquerie and then chops the whole train in half. Somehow. Oh, by the way, did I mention Brian dies during this mission? Haha, JK, he's fine. He spends the whole execution fee on new gold-plated cybernetics, because of course he does. It's then revealed that the boulder that hit Brian was pushed by Mika under the influence of the Queen of Dreams. So Monty and Mika take these convenient pills Brian has lying around in order to go back into their dreams and confront her. Monty finds himself back in Prologue Alley, except in this version, David is the executioner that kills Candy and saves Mika, whom Candy had kidnapped. Then it cuts to Monty and Dolly, yes, her name is Dolly, in the void from that one episode of SpongeBob. She says a load of nothing about memories and then dumps you back to the scene where Moon River drowned. She then undergoes a transformation into this arm-caged pendulum thing that looks like it was inspired by the Hindu goddess Durga. This is a really awesome, unique design, and thankfully it carries over to the fight. She's got laser beams and shields all over the shop, she's flying, then she's on the ground, then she's up on these platforms or crumpled into a heap. It's great. My only problem is that if you've invested into the upgrade system really at all by this point, this boss is way too easy. When you have her defeated, she reveals that David is Monty's brother, for all the actual impact this fact has. Then her head comes off, Monty has an explosive orgasm, and then wakes up with all his memories back intact. Impeccable writing. Impeccable. Monty writes himself a contract to go after David, but then David just turns up at the office and they have a mundane chat about fuck all before Monty draws his sword on him. David asks if they could fight somewhere else, and Monty agrees because, and I quote,
Action games are supposed to have wide open maps. Especially because you're the last boss.
The final stage takes place back in the Moon Palace. Considering it's nearly the exact same stage as before, all the same criticisms apply. The final boss fight also starts the same way as before. Monty quipping, David looking like the highest tier gimp money can buy. But when you defeat his first phase, he goes into this dark matter cocoon, nuking the place and firing you both out into space. David steps out of his cocoon in this spiffy ascended form, to which Monty responds by poofing into a member of the Borg. The challenge is upped nicely. David now has a variety of hard-hitting attacks and a sizable health pool. When Ascended David is defeated, he blasts you back to the moon's surface and then fires a little bolt of dark matter in hot pursuit. When they land, the bolt turns out to be David in his OG executioner form. This final phase is a mirror match, Dark Link style. He has all the same attacks as you and employs them well, stun locking and getting you with the dodge attacks and all. Eventually though, Monty slips his sword through David's guts and he's done for. He says a few ominous words before he goes down and then Monty scalps him. But then dark matter starts to take hold of Monty again, so he does the logical thing and lops his arm off. Cut to Mika back on the yacht, crying her eyes out, and Moon River looking up at a now blood-red moon. Moon River goes into the office and places a hit on someone. I think the implication is that it's on Monty, but I would have thought the fact that he just severed his arm would mean he's not being controlled by dark matter, so it wouldn't make much sense. But then it shows Monty on the moon, very clearly using dark matter to rebuild the palace, and then credits roll. So I guess I don't know anything about anything. You win this round, Suda. Now, my final word on Killer is Dead. As I've said, this game is the epitome of style over substance. The combat is smooth, but largely one-dimensional. The bosses have interesting designs for the most part, but while some are enjoyable, others are repetitive and unoriginal. The story is an extravagant, nonsensical romp, and thankfully it doesn't pretend to be anything otherwise. The dialogue in the cutscenes is the real selling point. Watching these ridiculous caricatures speak is like watching an alien species attempt to replicate human social interaction after watching Jack and Jill, starring Adam Sandler and Al Pacino's lust for money. The campaign is fairly short, and while the Gigolo missions might be quirky enough to hold your attention for another hour, the challenge missions sure as fuck won't. I get the impression that the final product was either rushed or intended to be longer, but that's just speculation. The game could have benefited from some degree of increased complexity in almost all regards, but taken for what it is, it's a flashy little experience that really instills a passion into a player. A man's passion. A passion for trains. Hey guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I just had a steak dinner followed by watching Deadpool 2, so I'm in good form. If you're feeling similarly good after watching my nonsense, feel free to drop a like or a comment. My social media is in the description, and yeah, there's a link to my previous video on Daxter there as well, if you want to watch that. Sorry this one took so long coming out, I had finals to study for, so yeah. Anyhow, hope you have a nice day, and I'll see you next time, you beautiful fiends. Ta-ta!